Okay, well, thanks for having me. It's been a long time um, since I've known Ben. I know we've kind of he followed along a career many years back and took my spot when I left the company. So we've stayed in touch a little bit over the years. But I'm going to start the intro with I was and pun intended delighted to see some of the names that appeared on the screen. Uh, but this takes me back to like somewhere around 1987, hanging out in Vernal, Utah, in Devin Howell's backyard on his awesome mini ramp skateboarding. Um, and this is kind of where my mindset was in high school, was just have fun, do whatever. And I was into art programs. I wanted to be an artist. That's kind of what I had imagined in my mind because it was fun. I mean, that's all I kind of thought about at the time. I didn't give any thought really to what it would mean to make money or have to survive, or the tech industry really hadn't even, I mean, it was out there, but it wasn't the web as we know it. I went to college, and it's good to see you, Devin. So I went to college, and at Weber State University, and somewhere around 1994, the World Wide Web was made public, and this was kind of exciting. I was working in the library for the IT department of the college, and they asked us to make a website for Weber State University, and we were like, well, what does this mean? And so you go down and you look at Netscape, and Netscape 1.0 had no images, and you just look at, when you'd open up the World Wide Web, you didn't open your browser, you open up the internet. And the feature on Netscape was new sites added to the internet. And that was like pretty exciting. You'd see 5 or 6 new sites had been added that day. And then later in the day, there'd be more. And then after like 5 days, it didn't even matter. You couldn't keep up with it, but it was pretty exciting. And then they added images. So the browser Mosaic came out, and it supported images. And as a graphic design student, it's pretty exciting. Like, I was like, this is really cool. Like, you can put images on this website and people can see it all over the world. And we made some horrific looking, ugly websites and messing around with stuff all the time. But it sort of opened this vision of what it could be like. And I left college and went to work for a company. It was kind of the hot tech company at the time. iOmega was this company in Roy, Utah, and they made the zip drive, zip disks, and jazz drives. And it was,
I totally remember this.
he put like 100 megabytes on a $20 disc, and that was amazing. Like, it was like the best thing ever, because it used to cost $100. So they cut the cost in way down, and it was pretty exciting. I was working for this cool company. They were, when you go to these big exhibits and shows, they were the hot company at the time.
Yeah, everybody in the design departments had a zip drive so that you could hold all of your design files on the a zip disk. I totally remember that.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was fun. It was exciting. They were like the first computer peripheral that was kind of cool, because everything else was like beige and like that plastic and kind of ugly. And they made this thing that was blue. It was like different. It stood out, and they had this fun marketing and fun campaign to go along with it. So it was kind of exciting. And I worked for the software department designing software, which is something I'd never heard of before in school. Didn't know how to do it, but I started learning about this human factors engineering, and we were building prototypes and figuring out things as we went. And I left there and worked for a little agency where we started building websites. We're still doing a lot of like CD-ROM authoring and all kinds of crazy stuff, doing animation, Flash websites, all that kind of stuff for years, and spent a lot of time there. I worked for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Salt Lake City. They have a big software department, and we were doing lots of internal tools and different type of process related websites, things you'd never think about, but a lot of really interesting UX problems to solve. And I left there to work for Family Search, and subsequently, after Family Search, went to Ancestry.com, where I spent good 8 years. Exciting working with a great team, a lot of growth there. I learned a lot about design and community, and fun working with a product that has millions of users around the world. And after Ancestry, I went to work for Instructure. Spent about a year there working with on their design systems team, and now I'm landed at Lucid, which is a really exciting company, doing a lot of really neat things. And I didn't really see it from the outside when I was thinking about where my next step would be, but I'm thrilled to be at Lucid right now. That was probably too long of an intro, but I had to get the skateboarding in and the cool iOmega stuff. So
no, it does show the breadth of your experience and where you've been, and gives some context to the team, so, or the group. So yeah, what is your definition of like a delightful experience? I think we could start there, and then we can go a little bit deeper as we go down.
Well, I think it's just you like it. I mean, that's easy. It's like a human condition. It's a human emotion we feel. Like when it doesn't suck and when it's fun, it's delightful. Like that is, I think it's pretty simple. I don't think we can put too much more on that. If we're doing something that we're trying to do and it feels good, we get in that moment of flow, we enjoy doing it, it saved us some kind of pain, that's usually tipping into the delight side.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't feel like a chore. Yeah, for sure. Can you give us some examples of how you've striven to like create delightful experience over the years, and what opposition looked like to creating those delightful experiences?
I mean, kind of start, like, I don't know if the intent ever has been to like, I'm going to create a delightful experience. I mean, that is probably something a company like Disney or any other company would have that objective. Like, we just want to make people smile or have fun as like your end goal. I've never been in that situation where I mean, some of my art projects, that's what I try to do. I think that making art is fun, and I hope that people see it and they like it. They just have like a pleasurable moment, or they're just be happy about what they see, or it sparks some kind of interest. So I just start there. Like, I don't think I've ever started with that as the end goal. However, in all of the stuff that I've worked on over the years, that has been a part of it. You're trying to do something that attracts attention, trying to make something better for the customer that was bad before. You're just trying to make the world a better place in some way, and that I think falls into delight. So one example, just going back to my first days at iOmega, we were making these CD-ROMs, and one of the things in opposition to a delightful experience in the early days of computing was when you bought a product, you couldn't just plug it in and it would work. It would identify the product. It would download the drivers from the internet, and you're all set up and working. There was like a lot of complicated things involved in just getting something to work. And if you did it in the wrong order, Windows was notorious for just messing it up forever. So if you like plugged in the product before you installed the driver, Windows 95 would install a default driver for whatever it was, and your product wouldn't work, and you could never change it. You had to like go through this complicated task of redoing it. So one of our first objectives when working there was like, how do we make it so when people buy the product and they put this, we get all the steps in the right order, they do things in the right order, we make it kind of fun for them as they install it, and everything gets working. Because if you plug the product in for the first time and it works, that's a delightful experience, versus getting a product and nothing works and have to call support and have to do all of these things. So we did a lot of really creative workarounds. Like the way they designed the box had we had to stack it in a way that the CD-ROM was on top. It had to have a big message that said, put the CD-ROM in first. And so we'd get people to do that step. And then we would have the CD-ROM start up automatically. And it takes a while to load information off of a CD-ROM because it holds 650 megabytes at the time, and it's got to spin around. I mean, this is like, I don't even know if anyone even has a CD-ROM anymore. It's like this weird thing, but it was a lot of work to get it going. So you would load this stuff, and it took a long time. And so you're trying to, okay, what can we do to keep people entertained while this CD-ROM is loading? So we'd try to come up with some kind of intro animation or something that was kind of fun, but didn't take up too much space. So we could load it quickly, and it would usually loop or play some kind of animation or get the user excited about the product. And these were totally ridiculous. Like we did, we hired these bands to like write custom like rock music and all this stuff. And we had weird little animations where we just try to do stuff flying all over the screen. And I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous, but it seemed kind of cool at the time because the computers didn't do things like this. It was like your computer's playing video, and it's got some music going on these crappy speakers, and it's fun. So we would do that. But then at that point, the screen would open up, and we would take the user through the software to make sure that this piece got installed. And I did some hacky stuff that was absolutely crazy. Like we would figure out how to copy files in the right place on the system and move things around. And I was doing this as like a graphic designer because I just figured out if we can move this stuff around and solve the problem right, then it works better. And it was actually really great. Like we were able to reduce a lot of the problems, a lot of the support calls that would come in when something didn't work, because you would do a lot of these things behind the scenes while we're presenting the user with some kind of fun message about what their product's going to be like.
Did it take a lot of convincing to like be able to try to create those fun experiences while they waited, rather than just being super basic with like loading? Or because it sounds like there's definitely creative ideas that then these are our moments of, hey, we could actually have a little bit of fun in this scenario because we have to wait. A customer or a user has to wait for something to happen before you can get into the functional, reliable aspects of doing the thing.
Well, budgets were always a concern. I mean, it was nice, and we had the luxury back then of working for a company they had grown from 2 million to 2 billion in like less than a year. And so they had more cash than they knew what to do with, and they were trying everything. So we had that luxury of kind of like doing whatever we want, but there were constraints about how to make this right and how to not disrupt things. Like if in the CD-ROM world, you couldn't just change it. When the CD got shipped, it was a physical object with that code that way everywhere, and there was no updating it over the internet or fixing your typos or anything like that. So there was a very rigid process in releasing these kinds of things. And at the time, it seemed like normal things that you have to do is go through this ISO 9000 very specific manufacturing process and have everything reviewed in a lot of detail. So there those kind of barriers. There were budget barriers. There was just time and know-how. Everything we were doing was brand new. Like we didn't know how to do anything. We didn't know what the consequences or effects would be. The CD-ROM authoring was brand new. It was changing so quickly. The tools that you use, I mean, a lot like today, but it felt even more accelerated back then. But it was just kind of exciting. In other places I've worked and teams I've worked on, it is a challenge, but mostly it's a challenge. Most of the opposition is in my own head, like being caught in trying to do something that maybe isn't the right thing or looking at the problem the wrong way. I think there's always a way to get something done if you go through the steps, can communicate your story the right way and work through it.
Yeah. I mean, within every business, there's always some constraints, right? Whether that's technical constraints, business restraints, timing restraints. And as you've worked through those problems, or when we've identified problems within the work that you're going to do, how do you balance like solving problems versus creating that like shock and awe or delightful experience, and finding space and time, or finding opportunities to create a little bit of that delight, while also hitting the requirements of what you're trying to build from a business perspective or a technical perspective, or
So I think that, what you're asking is kind of, balance between it is kind of an interesting way to think about it. It's more, first it's realizing that solving the problem is going to be delightful for somebody. So just doing that is like, it's just table stakes. Like, you've got to solve the problem if you want to make anybody delighted about anything. But you can do that in a very boring way, or you can do it in a way that is fun and familiar. And it can be, it's a challenge. Like the way that I see things and the way we all see things in a creative industry is going to be a little bit different, and it can be risky to go into that outrageous territory. And I think you have to tread carefully. You have to double check your own ideas. Ask yourself if, am I crazy thinking that this would be cool or fun, or is it safe? It's also fun to challenge the people you work with, and ask them, the question, to say, so if they push back on ideas, you can ask them the question, say, well, so you want to be really conservative about this project and really safe, and not shake things up, or not put anything at risk, so that we just have barely enough improvement. And turning the table on things like that will let people think, oh, no, we want to do something really great and cool. But people are also justified in pushing back on me or on us, because I do have some really bad ideas. They're kind of crazy, but I know that some of the ideas I've had have been like wildly terrible.
Yeah. When I think of delightful experiences, I think of little things that happen in an experience that you're doing. So MailChimp comes to mind often with I've got a lot of stress right before I push that send email to thousands of people. And they create this like slight delightful experience when the second you press send, you're like, that you see their little monkey hand go up and say, yay, good job. You kind of have that like release of emotion to some degree, but there's just a simple delightful experience. Or when you hit the like button on a Twitter post, and you see that like a little explosion of I like this kind of expression. Justin has a really good a question here that he posted in the chat. He says, can you talk about the process you currently have implemented at Lucid to ensure a feature is a delightful experience, and what does it look like from concept to delivery?
Yeah, I can hint at that a little bit. I can't say that this is the process that I've implemented, because I haven't been there a long time. But one great thing, Lucid has a set of, we call it the way of product development, and one of the four main features is that we build for delight. And the general principle around that is that you just strive to delight the customer in everything that we do, whether it's the programming, the customer support, the UX design, any level that is brought up as a core value or principle of the team. This wasn't implemented or pushed on by me, but it's one of the reasons that I wanted to work for a company like that, is they're really forward thinking about that. And it's a real thing. It's really exciting when you're in a meeting talking about the product, and the head of engineering comes out and says, hey, are we doing enough to delight the customer in this? Like, it just seems like this isn't that exciting. Or our VP of product says, hey, like these designs could be like, couldn't they be like nicer, or make the customer, is there something we can do to make this make, a little more exciting or interesting for the user? And it's brought up and referred to constantly from the executive level all the way down. So that makes it really easy to implement that as we go along. Now, as far as, from concept to delivery, because it's top of mind and because we're thinking about that in the product, we're trying to make sure that those are part of every, when we're into sprint planning, we're talking about what are some features we can add that are going to make this experience more delightful. We have, every level of that, of those areas. And I think we can talk about some of those areas, but, it comes down to all of the basic things. It's like, are we helping the customer get through this process faster? Will that make it more delightful? Are we doing something that makes it a little bit fun when they get a success? I think the thing you mentioned was great about the MailChimp. There's another one I'm reminded of, is the one that designers implemented at Instructure. When a student submits their assignment on time, they get the confetti kind of like goes across the screen. I was really skeptical. I was like, man, that's going to annoy people. But it was like, people were really excited about it. They loved it. They felt good that, and it reinforced that behavior of getting your assignments in on time. So you could get that little bit of relief. So coming through, back to this question at Lucid is just, starting from the concept level, is just, we're thinking about it. We're designing ways. We have designers experimenting with tools that can add those visual delight features, the eye candy that makes it interesting. We have, looking at the processes that we have and finding the pain points. Identifying the pain point is one of the biggest things that you can do in every process, through journey mapping, and make sure that you see where the low points are for the customer. Getting all of those things and then delivering. It's like taking the time to put those extra nice things into production. Having the support of engineering and the leadership at Lucid is one of the things that really makes that happen. I feel like I don't even have to push that hard for those kinds of things. Everyone, if anything, is pushing me. So
yeah, that was one of my additional questions, was just, do you feel like it's just the design industry that cares about delightful products, or are there other industries like product and engineering that really, really desire to make it a priority? Because it seems like it would need to be a shared level of desire at the leadership level as well as at the team level to really look for opportunities to create these extra levels of delight within the product.
Yeah, it's definitely not just the designers. And if anything, it might just be the designers that are thinking about the sorts of visual delight indicators, because that's how we think about the screens and we think about what we're seeing on the screen. And that may be actually a flaw in our own thinking about delight from design. But I think, everybody wants to make people happy in some way. We want to make great products that delight people, make a lot of money. And so if you're a business guy and your product is not doing well, you're going to care about that. If money is your metric, you're going to care about that too. So I think, everywhere you can find it. There are engineers that they take monumental efforts to make their code run faster and do it better, and they come up with craziest kinds of algorithms and all this work to do like some task. And it's not just because they're like geeking out over it and they think the code is cool. It's like they have the exact same desires as the designer or anyone else. It's like they want a product to work well, to be used by lots of people, and make somebody's life easier somewhere.
Yeah. Laura has a really
John,
good question.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Hey,
I'm
Melissa.
driving, so
How's it going?
hi. Good. I just wanted to touch on that because you brought up the confetti thing at Instructure, and I actually think that that was a front-end developer's idea, and he was pushing it, it was like a side project for him. So I do think that engineers and developers care just as much as design about delighting the customer.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point, Melissa. I'm glad you brought that up. And carving out time for that is really important too, because I know from an engineering standpoint, we have an engineering day once a week where engineers can work on things that they want at Seismic, at least. So finding that opportunity or that space, or carving out space to come up with these ideas of how we can delight them, I think makes a lot of sense. Laura had a good question here of, as you've moved into management roles, how do you enable your employees to design for delight? Like,
one way is stay out of their way. Like, they've got great ideas, and let them champion ideas where employees are trying to find things that are creative and express things. It is, I think, it's easy to, as you start getting into management, to start feeling that weight of responsibility and wanting to avoid risk a little bit, and play it safe and do the safe things. And probably some of that happens because maybe I got burned a bunch of times in the past when I went out on a limb with some crazy idea. Got in trouble a little bit for blowing $10,000 hiring a comedian to do a product install video instead of doing it technical. Maybe there's things like that have happened in the past, that as you start getting into management, that was unfortunately not hypothetical, but I think that tendency is real. It's like, you get into management, you want to play it safe, and playing it safe is you can be successful just a little bit and it's still successful. And so there's that sort of safety barrier that you can build up when you're not the one doing things, and you just want to move along and do that. But a lot of the really great ideas come from people that are immersed in the product, your team, your employees, and they have creative ideas. So taking those ideas and championing them so that you're making sure that they can find the right, the story can be told to the right people, so those things can get approved and pushed through. That's one thing. I think the other thing that enables the teams is to build delight, is to really have a focus on making sure that they're solving the right problems and delighting in the right way. I could kind of answer this with a little bit of an experience I had at Ancestry. Back in 2014, we did this major design of Ancestry, and I was coming in there, and I was senior designer, and I was working on this. In my mind as a designer, it felt like the biggest problem at Ancestry was the design. It's like, it looks old, everything looks, we gave like a bad nickname to the old design system. We called it like Burnt Summer. And, it was like, the designers were like, we knew it was old, and thought it needed to be updated. In our minds, that was like the top priority. And this is the thinking was, for me, the most delightful thing would be like giving everything a new design, but that wasn't necessarily true for the customer. So we did all the work, we got all this stuff, we did all the focus groups, the surveys, and felt like the customers liked the design better. And it wasn't, when we released it, it wasn't that they didn't like it and that it didn't delight them. It was that it was about all the stuff that we didn't do. So there were a lot of other problems that also existed in the product over a lot of years. And the customer, they cared about those more than they cared about the way things looked and the visual design and all of these things. So even though we had implemented a lot of really delightful features. They were the wrong types of things to satisfy most of our customers. And that actually has the effect of creating a little bit of backlash, where if you do that, you get the wrong thing, then you're at risk for getting backlash. It's like, well, why did, and these are the kind of comments we would get back. It's like, why do you waste all this money hiring designers who only do this? And then you should hire programmers to fix the real problem. And that's the perception that we created from a large number of the community. And so it's, I don't know, that work probably had to be done, but had we spent more time looking at what the real problems were and more focus on the customers, maybe the result would have been a little bit different. I mean, you can't always make everyone happy. Like if anyone's seen the subpar parks, like the 1-star reviews of the national parks, like you're not going to make everyone happy. You're not going to delight everyone no matter what you do. But your goal is to get a lot of people in there.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of like when delight really just doesn't make sense in a product, but for some reason people hold on to something that makes them like happy, even though it just doesn't seem logical?
Well, I think, I mean, it can start to get, irritating if we're thinking of everything like, oh, I got to delight the user when they click this button. It's like, there are things that you have to do every day and you just want to do them and not think about them. Delight can actually, if you're going out of your way, it can become kind of annoying. It's like when you go into, I experience this all the time. Like there are stores that I don't go into because I know the salesperson is going to come up. It's like, how are you doing? Is everything okay? Are you like, and they're trying to make it a delightful experience for the customer, and they're trying to be friendly, and they're nice and everything, but I don't want to talk with anybody. I want to go in and find my thing. And so I even go in the back door and beeline away from the desk so they don't say anything to me or talk to me. And I think it's the same in software. Like there are some tasks that the most delightful thing is get me through it as fast as possible so I can get on to the most delightful part of my day, which is going to be hitting the mountain bike trail at 5 o'clock or whatever it is. It's like some things just being fast, doing it right is more important.
Yeah, it seems like there needs to be a tight coupling of solving a problem and creating an opportunity for delight in the, like, it seems like you could create too much effort or too many opportunities or too many touch points of delight that start to become annoying. And how do you balance between solving a problem but also solving it in a delightful way? I think can be really important. I'm thinking of when you brought up the confetti in structure, it reminded me of like within iPhones, and you text Happy New Year, you get that like firework effect, and it kind of vibrates your phone, and you kind of want to send that out to multiple people at that time. But if every time I sent a text to anyone, it did something like that, it would be majorly annoying, right? So how do you find ways to, or how do you know when to use delight while also solving a problem at the same time? I know, yeah, what's...
Well, one way is just to, I think, especially in software design, you really question any kind of delight or any feature that you're adding that adds any steps or time to the process. So if you're doing anything that adds an extra step or adds, the user has to do they have to dismiss the dialogue that says, great job. If you have to do that, then then you're failing at it. One example, reminds me when I was a little kid, my grandpa was a barber, and he had in his barber shop, and I remember this, there was a booster seat for when little kids come in to get their haircut, and you could get a booster seat because you have to get your head up above the edge of the chair so he could cut the hair. And I guess getting your hair cut is like, I don't know of any little kids that love getting their hair cut. It's like scary. Your parents are telling you not to put the scissors down, and then you've got an old guy with scissors like behind you, and the buzzing noises, and you don't want your hair cut. And so it's scary. But my grandpa had this booster seat that was also like, had a rocking horse head on it. So you weren't getting your haircut, you get to ride on the horse, and he would use his barber chair to like move the chair up and down and spin it around a couple times. So it was like fun for little kids. And remember, it was like exciting when you get to do that. I mean, I remember that even like, that's kind of fun, like get the horse out, you get to ride the horse, not get your haircut. And that specific little instance solved the problem of getting you boosted up. It solved the problem of the kid being scared, and it made it fun for the user, as well as getting everything in position to make that happen. So, I mean, that's one of those areas, and I think there are a lot of things like that in software. I mean, sometimes just solving the problem. There's a comment here from Annika. It said the best delight experience for me are the ones where I don't even realize that I'm being delighted. It's like, we got the crap out of the way so that you could get your work done. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. There is another comment from Susan here that says, are moments of delight the same thing as variable rewards in Nir Eyal's hooked model? Do you have a relationship to that in any way?
I'm going to have to, I don't know what Nir Eyal's hook model is, or I don't remember. So I wouldn't be able to answer that one.
That's okay.
I'm going to look into it though.
Yeah. Is there any advice that you can give this group on more guaranteed ways, or more concrete patterns that you've seen where creating delightful experiences can be more successful than the less successful? So you've given some really good examples of at Ancestry, we decided to create some delightful experiences, but we didn't hit the mark on certain areas. And then we've gotten some really good examples of where delightful experiences can be delightful, and you can have good reserve to it. But do you have any solid advice that you could give the group around being successful?
Yeah, there is just one thing. I think there's a video that everyone should watch. It's from Dana Chisnell, I think is the name, and the video presents a framework for delight, and breaks it into three categories. Call it pleasure, flow, and meaning. And she breaks down how you delight in each of those areas. Pleasure kind of being the high level stuff that just makes it fun, the stuff on the surface, which is really important. And it kind of ties this into the hierarchy of needs pyramid. Like we have before we can make things really pleasurable, we have the bottom layers of the pyramid, which are, making your product usable, making it reliable, and making it functional. So once we've kind of accomplished those, then we can take it that extra step further and make the product really nice and really fun to use. The second thing that I would offer as advice is just get your mindset around away from the idea that it's your product that is delightful, or people don't come to your product to use your product. They're trying to do something else. They don't want to go to your website to use your website because your website's cool. There are some cases of products where maybe that is the case, but usually they're there to do something else. So you shift that same mindset, and and make your product do something or help the customer do something that you know is going to be pleasurable. Guaranteed ways that you can delight your customer is, like, the first one is, if you have influence on cost is a big one. Like, if people are paying for something and it's expensive, and you come up with a way where they get the same thing, but it's a lot cheaper, like 10 times cheaper, that's like really delightful. I remember the reason that we switched over to Figma in the early days. Figma was a really cool product and it had some really great features, but the editing tool set wasn't as good as what we were using, but it was a lot cheaper than this unholy combination of all these other tools we had to use to do the same thing that Figma would do. Now, Figma has been amazing, and it's grown to where it's a really great tool. And I would imagine that it's covered all of those gaps in the early days. But cost is the reason that we were delighted with it initially. It's like, oh, we can pay $15 a month per user instead of like 30 for all these other tools we're trying to use to get the same effect. The other way is just doing something better than other tools that are out there to do it. So, my wife does, she's a yoga instructor, and I ask her for some examples, and she says, okay, like one example is there's a certain type of yoga mat. It's called the B mat. And she said, it's just the best because it's the stickiest. Even if you're sweaty and it gets wet, it stays sticky. It doesn't cost more than anything else. It just like holds up better, and they have like nice colors. So she buys that one because it's like, it makes her yoga a delightful experience. She doesn't just like the mat because it's a mat. It just helps her have a better experience when she's teaching and doing yoga. And then the other area that I think is like a game changer for everyone, and this is an area that product and UX and engineering can influence a lot, and that's just helping customers do something faster. In the early days of the web, things were downloaded really slow, and it's gotten progressively faster and faster, but it is still like awful experience to do anything on a web app or any program or like on your phone. It's just all the things you have to do, things you have to tap, clicking like drop downs and then scrolling to the bottom of a 6,000 country list to get to your country. And all of these little things are just like little paper cuts that make it just insane. And if you can find ways to make that process better, the chances are higher your customer is going to get into a flow and get to the thing that makes them happy faster. I mean, you can go through and this is a great exercise I suggest everyone do, is like take whatever design you're doing, look at it. And as a designer, you're used to seeing things on the screen, and you're moving at the speed of light. Like your eyes can go, like click this button, do this. You know exactly how it all works in your mind, and it's the speed of thought. Like it's so fast. But make yourself just say out loud all of the actual steps that you have to do on your interface. So it could go something like this: like user reads the page content. They decide if they want to continue. They move the mouse to the credit card field. They click in the credit card field. They go to their wallet and pull out their credit card, flip it over, and then look at the numbers and type in the numbers and look back at the card, and then type the rest of the numbers, look back at the card, and then type the rest of the numbers. And then they move the mouse to the expiration date field, and then they look again at the card and type in the expiration date, and then go back and then type it in. Then they move the mouse again to the next field, and so forth. I mean, it's absurdly annoying to do that exercise, but it makes you think of how absurd your interface is that you're making people do to type that in. And you want to like, well, can we cut out any of those fields? What if we implement the credit card scanner that just like types it all in? Like that's a pretty delightful experience, is hold your credit card up to your phone and it gets all the numbers and you didn't have to type it in. So by doing that, you can count and you can measure the friction for a user to get through the process. And then you can start to cut it out and make things a lot easier. The book, The Best Interface is No Interface by Golden Krishna it's my favorite book about UX design, because he just goes into that in a very, I think there's one section where he describes a process, like 5 pages of the same thing repeated over and over that you go through, but it makes a point in our interfaces. So making things faster, I think is a fantastic way to delight the customer. And we expect it to happen. And if you can't make it faster, you can make it feel faster. That's kind of the final thing, is like focus on this area of perceived performance. If we have an example at Lucid where a customer might be generating a huge diagram from their AWS cloud configuration, and it can take 5 to 10 minutes, which that in internet time, like that seems absurdly painful. And it's more painful if you click go and you just see the spinner there. If you click go and it says, hey, this could take 10 minutes, maybe now is a good time to go get a glass of water or whatever. Maybe that doesn't feel so long. It's like the computer's got to do a lot of stuff. At least I'm not waiting. Thanks for telling me. That didn't seem so bad that it took 10 minutes. It's amazing that they could do all of this stuff in 10 minutes. Where one experience can make you dread even 5 seconds, can feel like the worst amount of pain, versus 5 seconds can be like not that bad. So making it feel fast is another area where I think designers can have a big influence on that in the product.
Yeah, I think another really good example of like make things appear faster than they really are is I learned that Instagram, when you actually like an image, they immediately show that the action was taken, but in the background it might not take. So the heart immediately turns red, but in the background it doesn't actually like the image at a system level until like a certain amount of time afterwards. But the immediate interaction of knowing that it actually took the input from the user just made people feel a lot like the app was 10 times faster, when really it's not as fast as people might perceive it is.
Yeah, assume that an action is going to be successful.
Yeah,
if you know that 95% of the time we don't get any issues, it might be safe to assume that. And then the one time something failed, then you figure out, well, how do we gracefully tell them it actually failed? It's like, oh, there was a problem. That's 95% of the time it's going to be a little more delightful than sitting to wait to see that everything went okay.
Yeah. Well, if anybody else has any questions, please post them in the chat. We only got 5 more minutes. Cameron had a really good question. He said, awesome advice, love the horse story. Curious on some ideas around the triangle paradox of speed, cost, and quality, and picking 2. You generally can't, at least the mentality is that you can't have all 3. How would you steer a client towards, or a customer or internal team towards taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture to focus on delighting the customer and solving their needs?
So in that triangle, speed is usually referred to like how long does it take us to build the feature, but I guess you could use it in the same way. Like if making a feature fast, making it cheap, and having it high quality. I think this is something where you really have to go back to the customer. Another great thing to look for is Jared Spool talks a lot about this in his discussions about delight. He brings up something called the Kano model. Kano, I can't remember how to pronounce it. So it's one of those, Kano.
The Kano model.
Kano, thank you. The Kano model, which is fantastic for it provides a framework to talk about what features are most important and how they affect customer satisfaction. And it also gives you so you have a framework to talk about it, and then it also gives you a tool set to categorize those things in terms of how it will affect customer success. So some features might be delight features, like we do these and the customer's going to be really excited about it. Some of the features might be, we do these and it just barely, all it does is meets their lowest level base expectations. Some features, if we do them well, it increases delight. If we do them poorly, it has a negative effect on their satisfaction. Some features, it doesn't matter how we do it, their customer might be indifferent. But if you can use a model like that, that would allow you to decide. It's like, okay, is making it, how do customers feel about fast versus the level of quality or the number of features that we get into this? And that would give you some signal from the customer on how to approach that. But I think it's really about, leaning on the customer to make that, to provide that input rather than just picking the thing that we like or want the most.
Yeah. Well, I think we're up on time. If anybody else has any questions, I'm sure John would be happy to respond to them in the Product Hive Slack group or through other means. But I just want to thank John for taking the time to chat with us about this, share his experiences, and help us all work towards creating some delightful experiences. So thank you so much, John, for joining us today.
All right, thanks for having me.